I've made several videos on making bomber seats, and I'll explain where this term comes from. After the Second World War, lots of home builders of racing cars used war surplus seats for military aircraft since they were light and inexpensive. The supply of surplus ones has dried up, but the style became so popular that many people are building their own, even for street-driven cars. I've shown how to make different versions of bomber seats from simple to complex, but today I'm going to walk you through the process of making something even more challenging. This one will be styled to resemble the seat from a Porsche 550 Spider, which is very curvy and highly desirable. It's essential to have a form of some sort when you're making a form this complex. I'm going to make a wooden station buck, and to speed the process, I was able to borrow the seat from a Porsche Speedster, which is dimensionally similar to the 550 Spider seat. I'll use this seat to get the dimension and contours I need, which will make the job much easier. There are many fiberglass seats available that you could make a buck from if you can't get your hands on a Speedster seat, or you could make a buck from scratch. The buck I'm making will fit on the inside of the seat, but it's a lot easier to do the layout of the location of the stations by working on the outside. So I've used 1/4-inch masking tape to lay out the center line of the long stations for the buck. I started with the center line. I used a tape measure to find the center of the seat and put a lot of center marks on it. Then I laid down a piece of 1/4-inch masking tape in the center. Then I used a piece of fixed distance to lay out the edge of the tape on the right side and on the left side. And I laid down 2 more strips of tape to show the locations of the side stations. So now I'll lay out the location of the stations that go from side to side. I want to have one station right in the center, so I'll use a piece of tape to show the location of that. I'll use 2 stations on the seat bottom and 3 on the seat top, and it's not possible to have even spacing both in the center and at the edge, so I'm just going to eyeball something that seems to divide the volume evenly. So I'll use masking tape to do my layout. I think I'll start right about here. And I'll put the next station right about here. And the last station will go here. I'll flip this around to do the layout on the other side. So again, I'll divide this roughly into thirds. So we'll have one station right here and one station right here. Obviously, these seat braces are getting in the way a lot, so I'm just going to work around those. So I'll estimate where this goes down toward the edge. So that's the rough layout for all the stations, and I'll start taking patterns off of the outside of this. I'll use those patterns to cut the wood that fits on the inside. With the layout done for the location of the stations, I'm going to start making patterns that will allow me to cut these stations out of pieces of plywood. I'm going to start with the center station that goes along the length, and I'm going to make this pattern in 2 pieces. I'll make one piece from the center to the top, and the other piece from the center to the bottom. And I'm going to use chipboard to do the patterning. This stuff is pretty floppy, and I found it helps a lot if I just bend an angle on the top of this. That really stiffens the board quite a bit. So we'll put this in position. I'm going to use a compass to lay out a trim line on this part. So I'll just keep the compass tight against the seat and draw a line. Then I'll trim on that line. Now I can test the fit of this. I'm going to put a little notch in it right here. There's a beaded edge on this part, so the notch is to clear the beaded edge. So that's close, and to get it closer, I'm going to use a felt tip marker and just run the marker along the seat, making a new mark on the chipboard. Then I'll trim on that new mark, and I'll test the fit again. And that is an excellent fit. So using the same technique I used to make the upper piece, I made another piece that fits on the lower part of the seat, and you can see it's a pretty nice fit. So it's much easier to make this complicated shape in two parts rather than one. So now I'm going to join these together, and I'm going to use hot glue for that. Very simple material, but it works quite effectively for a job like this. So I'll squirt a little bit of glue on the interface. Then I'll just nestle these together, clamp this in place, put another clamp out here to hold these together. I'll put a little more glue in this joint here. So once this glue sets up, this will be a wonderful pattern for cutting the plywood to be the center station for the buck. So I'll lay my pattern down on a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, and I'll weight it down so it can't slip as I mark the edge. Then I'll use a felt tip marker and mark the trim line. Now I'll use a bandsaw to make the cut. So I'll try this against the seat now and see how it fits. After just a little bit of sanding, I have this station fitting the seat perfectly. I'm very happy with the fit I've achieved. So using the same patterning technique, I'll make a pattern to fit the right side of the seat, and I'll use the same pattern to make the stations for both the right and left side. That way I can be sure that the seat will be symmetrical. All three of the long stations are in place now. Next, I'll flip the seat over and start making the patterns for the stations that go from side to side. So I put lines of tape exactly where the stations will go, and I prepared a piece of chipboard by reinforcing the edge, and I put a center line on it. So let's do this station first. I'll put the center line on the center stripe of tape and just loosely draw in the contour. So I'll make a rough cut. Put it into place and make a second roughing cut. And I'll keep going in this manner until I have a nice fit from side to side. So with just a few minutes work, I have all of the patterns made. You can see they're all matching the tape lines very closely. So these were patterned on the outside. I find it a little easier to make my patterns on the outside when I can. On the bottom of the seat, I can't take the patterns from the outside because the seat mounts are in the way. So for those, the technique will be very similar. I just need to modify it so that my patterns fit the inside. I have the patterns made for the bottom three stations, and I'll test them to make sure they fit properly. This one looks good, this one looks good. And it looks like I have an excellent fit on all of these stations. So the next thing I'll do is to transfer the shape of these stations onto a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. So I'll line up the top edge of this and use a felt tip marker and trace around the edge. And now I can cut out this station. I'll check the fit, and I'll do a little hand sanding on this to dial in the fit so it's perfect. I've cut and fitted all of the cross stations, and there's one more step before I join them to the long stations. I want to mark the corner for the flange on the seat side. I put a line of tape right on this corner, and I'm going to make a 45-degree angle cut on the edge of each station, pointing to that corner. I'll mark the rest of these and trim them all together. Now that the corners are trimmed on all the stations, I'm going to cut 3 notches in each one. It's important that these notches are equally spaced so they'll align with the long stations. I'll use my tape layout lines to mark the centers of the notches on one station, then I'll cut the notches and use the first station as a pattern for all the others. I want the depth of the notch to go about halfway into the part. So the notches in the first part are cut, and I'll use this as a template to cut the next pieces. So I'll be working off the center line of all parts. So I'll align the center notch with the center line on this part, and I've also made a limit line that shows me how deep the notches will go on this part. It's about halfway across this surface. So I'll get this lined up, and I'll use clamps to hold it snugly in place. Then I'll use a sharp pencil to mark the cuts for the slots. And now I can cut these notches. So I'll use the same technique to lay out and cut the slots and all the other parts. I've cut all the notches and all the cross stations, and because they were all cut from the same part, I have perfect alignment for all of the notches. So that'll make it easy to assemble the buck once we get to that stage. The next step is I want to lay out the notches that go in the center station, the center long station. So I'm going to get set up to do that. I'll use these tape lines as a reference, and I'll just put a little ink mark right in the center of each one of these pieces of tape. So these dots of ink are my reference for the center of each slot for the cross station. And if you remember, the slot depth is different for each of these stations, so I'll make the appropriate depth slot in each of these locations. So I've done the layout for each of the slots, and now I can cut these on the bandsaw. So there's the last cut. Now I can fit all these pieces together and see how they fit in the seat. So the fit is looking really good, and the next step is I need to transfer the notches from the center station to the 2 side stations. I put matching holes in all the long stations, so now I can use alignment pins to put these in the right position to transfer these slots from one part to the next. I'll mark the other side station in the same way. Then I'll cut them both on the bandsaw. So the stations are all notched, and I'll test fit everything together. And the fit is excellent. So I want to stabilize this buck by putting some wood blocks in the corners. I'm going to put the wood blocks in the corners of the center station, the front station, and the top station. This will also allow me to put temporary screws into these blocks to hold the sheet metal once I start doing the shaping. So with the blocks screwed into place, I'm going to contour them with a disc sander. Okay, that should do it. So the buck is finished, and the contours match the original seat very accurately. If you'd like to build a buck like this, I have drawings available on my website with a full-size pattern for each of the stations. In the next video, I'll start shaping metal to fit this buck. So I'll see you next time. I love making these videos, and I'm honored that you're watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified about new videos. I read every comment, and I do my best to answer all questions. If you like what I'm doing, please click the Patreon link and become one of the great people who help me create new videos.